Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Family Treehouse, a podcast series brought to you by Story, where I chat with people who have a passion for genealogy, storytelling, or both. I'm your host, Heather Honert, and get ready, genealogy friends, because today's guest is Debra Dudick, and she knows research inside and out. Debra leads adult and teen services at Fountaindale Public Library. She's an executive board member for the Illinois State Historical Society and even earned a postgrad certificate in genealogy from the University of Strathclyde in Scotland. Super jealous about that. Plus, if you've ever wondered how to trace your World War I ancestors, she literally wrote the book on it. So, welcome to the show, Debra.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for having me.
I have to ask before we get started, I'm super excited about the whole Scotland thing. Like, were you in person when you did that, or did you do it is it online?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. My graduate school, my first graduate degree is in library science.
Yeah.
So I studied abroad at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. So I was there attending school. That was a lifelong dream for not only myself, but for my grandma as well. She wanted me to go to Scotland to see where her people were from.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I went to school, I learned to be a librarian, and they had a fantastic class called Genealogy as a library service. And
Oh,
that,
I
yeah,
love
it
that.
was fantastic because this was in those early days. This is when Family Search was doing something called Family Search Labs as a
Yes.
beta, right?
Yeah.
So we actually got to beta the Family Search site before it actually went widely to the public. So that was really cool. And
No.
when I got back from Scotland and I started working my, library career, I I said, you know what? They have this class that's online called, get this genealogy degree. And I said, well, I could do that. I just finished school anyway. Let's do this. And I did finish the first year with my certificate. And then the rest of everything just kind of blew up. So it
Yeah.
is a three-part class. And I said, I've gotten at least one done. I should go back and do the other two. But then everything else kind of came our way, with World
Yeah.
War One, with all the other genealogy research that we do. But it was definitely worth it. And if
Yeah.
anybody is looking for that postgraduate diploma, the teachers
Yeah.
are amazing. The online sessions, you're going to get a lot out of. Even, when I tell people that, yes, a lot of it's based out of the UK, but they do talk about the United States and Canada.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
well worth it if you're looking to get that little extra bump in your research. Well worth it.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh, I love that. And I will definitely get that link and I'll share it in your author page for the website because that'll be awesome. People can check that out. Yeah, that sounds amazing. I love Scotland. Scotland's one of my favorite places in the world. So, Deborah, tell us about just kind of start telling us about your background, how you got started in family history storytelling, and specifically, how did that World War One interest get started?
Yeah. Well, I was my grandma's genealogy assistant. So my grandma and her sisters, the aunts, were really, really big into what we would consider family history.
Mhm.
So they weren't so much the microfilm jockeys
Yeah.
as much as they were the correspondence junkies. So they would write to people and say, like, hey, do you remember this? Or do you remember that? And they would exchange letters with our cousins in Canada and Scotland and Australia. And it was really amazing because my job was to lick the stamps. This is before they had self-adhesive stamps.
Yeah.
So I got a bag of candy, Jolly Ranchers, which are still some of my favorites, and I got to lick the stamps and help put the letters in the mailbox and put the little letter up, and then we would go about the rest of our day. And then we would have these wonderful family reunions with her family, which was really fantastic. So I think that was part of it. All of these cousins that were much older than me, but still had time to talk to me and answer questions. And of course, then it was part of that whole world. We would sit around the table and the aunts would tell all of these stories and they
Yeah.
would talk about their family and where they were from in Scotland. And they would talk about their relatives who served in different wars. And they would talk about what it was like to grow up in places like Indiana, or about our relatives who went out to Oregon.
Yeah.
It was very much the people around us, both living and dead, were very, very present.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of my life growing up. And I really do have that fondness is still something that's still there, which is why when I got into World War One research was actually because of the passing of my grandmother. Some people broke into her house, stole everything that wasn't nailed down. But one of the things that they didn't steal was a bureau upstairs in the second floor of the house. And my mother and myself, my father, all my siblings, we were there trying to clean up the mess and take stock of
Mm.
everything. Um, it had felt like she had died all over again, which was
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
worst feeling in the world. But my mother was upstairs and she was going through that bureau and she found this little butterfly box with a little pocket diary inside of it. And she said, this belonged to your great grandfather. This is his World War I diary. This is yours now. So I put all of the genealogy materials, because thankfully, you know, they just wanted the antiques. They didn't want the genealogy paperwork, right?
Right.
So threw it in a box. I was too depressed to do anything with it.
Yeah.
Went off. I was a journalist at the time. So I went back to my full-time job as a journalist and didn't touch it, you know, for up teen years until I went to graduate school in Scotland and had to take that class, genealogy as a library service. And then I would go through the booklets, all of the papers she had left me. My mom mailed them to me. And all of a sudden, all that love came back. All of those stories, all those memories, all the wonderful things in my childhood, like all of it came back. And I said, oh my God, I can't let this go now. Like it's just who we are. We're just going with it.
Yeah.
And so when I got back to the States and we were getting ready for the centennial, I said, you know what? We got that little World War I diary. This will be easy. We're just going to transcribe it, right? It'll take a couple months. We'll just do some typing. We'll do some research. It'll be fun. Yeah, it'll be great. Going through it. And I'm finding poetry. I'm finding payrolls. I'm finding all this amazing stuff. I'm like, oh my God, this is a gold mine. This is everything I've ever wanted, everything I've ever heard about, every webinar ever. And then I get to a page that says my birthday. And I'm like, Grandpa Rhodes wasn't born on that day. What is this? And I had to go to the very, very front of the book. And in the thinnest pencil that you can imagine was the name Wesley A. Peaver, 3rd Field Ambulance Corps, Canada. It wasn't even my great grandfather's diary. All this research.
Oh my!
I was like, what do I do now? So that became the motivator. What I thought would be a simple project, then became a mission to learn. Okay, if we've got it, Grandpa Rhodes was not the guy, you know, it wasn't a klepto. He's not going to start going around like a ferret and stealing people's stuff, right?
Right.
And it survived. Not only it was in a footlocker in the barn, so it did survive a house fire in the 1930s. It survived being rummaged through by thieves in the year 2000.
Yeah.
And then it ended up in my, you know, little paper box that have all my items in it. I said, man, this little diary is, and of course it still had mud on the inside of it from France. I was like, you know what,
Debra,
we got to find this. We got to take this thing home. And then we've got to do everything that we can to figure out who it belongs to. And so that's began my research actually through Canada, not even through, I mean, it starts with like, yeah, we're going to do this, but then through Canada. And they put all of their esthetician or what would be their enlistment papers up online. Yeah. So that became my in-ramp to find Wesley Albert Peaver. And just through everything, Canada, amazing job, not only with their World War I records, but their communities, their local historians who have tried to keep the memory of those young men and women alive, which has been fabulous. There was a local guy who wrote about him. We exchanged letters. I found out that he passed away at the age of 21 outside of the war, thankfully. But he died of kidney failure, kidney disease. He had been gassed horribly at Hill 70. And his mother, unfortunately, had been quite ill and had been in and out of hospitals and such. So she passed away in 1940. So there were no direct relatives, but I did end up connecting with some extended relatives. And now the diary is very safely back in the Carleton Place, Ontario Museum. And so Wesley has his little cubby with a couple of photos of him and a couple of other accoutrements of letters that they found in their archives. So we at least brought the diary back home. And because of that, then I started researching, well, then how did Grandpa Rhodes get this in the first place? And then that's how it eventually got back to where we started.
Oh my god, that is an amazing story. Like, first of all, Wesley's story just wanted to be told.
Oh, absolutely. 110%. You know. And I'm like, are you sure you want me? Have you seen me? Do you know? Are you sure? I felt like I wanted to talk to this guy. I'm like, there are way better people. There are way better people at this, way better than I am. Are you sure you want this? So I buckled him, I do call him his diary. I kind of felt like, you know, there's a piece of that person in that diary. I kept him in the little box in my purse and then seat buckled it. in the front of the car. So when we were driving to Canada, and I'm like, okay, Wesley, we're going to stop here. It sounds weird, but it just felt right.
No, I
It
get
just
that.
felt right.
I get that. And I love too that you said, because this is so true of just the time period. You made the comment about, there's the microfilm junkies, but then there were that generation. I'm thinking of my grandparents as well, my grandmothers especially, that they wrote everything. I mean, when my grandmother died just a few years ago, she was 95, 96, and she still wrote me stuff like all the time. She would send me, cards and notes and things. So there's definitely a generation that was kind of how they did things. So
Yep, absolutely. Treasure
great.
trove for genealogists.
Yes, for sure. For sure. Oh, I love that. That was good. So, Deborah, tell us if there's somebody that kind of wants to take that first step into researching an ancestor that specifically served in World War One. And maybe they just have a name or they have a family story that has been passed down. How would you suggest they go about doing that to start?
Yeah, great. So there's a 5-step, as I put up 2 fingers, there's a 5-step process.
You are telling them for sure. It is 5.
It is 5 to start. Now, I always like to tell people that the family story is great because it's a unique guidepost, right? And we are leaning on events that happened 100 years ago, if
Right.
not a little bit more. And the details can be a wee bit shaky, and that's okay. Write down everything you know. And then you're going to go to 5 places if you don't already have things, which we're going to go to 5 places. So the first is to go onto Family Search and go to the Veterans Administration Master Index cards. This is one of the largest collections of veterans information for World War One. Now they also have a couple other little things like the Philippine War and the Spanish-American War and a little bit of Civil War thrown in there.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's going to be your largest collection of veterans information for individuals who either applied for benefits or their heirs or their next of kin received benefits. So if you were dishonorably discharged, you might not have been eligible for benefits. So I like to say it doesn't cover everybody, but it covers the biggest chunk of people we possibly can find. That's free. That's on Family Search. Typically what you're going to need for that: name, first name, last name. If you've got a roundabout date of birth, that's helpful. Roundabout date of death, that's super helpful as well.
Yeah.
So, and a location of at least roundabout where they were living. It's a little bit harder if you got somebody named John Smith or Hans Anderson or something. But you might have that. So with the Veterans Administration Master Index card, if that should come up, you should have one. If you're on the fence about it, go on to Ancestry to the U.S. headstone applications for military veterans. Now, that's a big one, because that should cover veterans. Remember, Abraham Lincoln and their Congress at the time were the ones who started to fund veterans' headstones and covering burials for veterans, 1871 and 1878. So some of those from 1861 onward, of course, are being paid for by the government. So there's a couple of changes in that. But they go through 1985. Now, after that fire at the National Personnel Record Center in 1973, I want to say, there is some record, what we call some blank spots in those records.
Yeah.
However, it should be able that they were able to prove their service some other way, but they're still going to get their headstone. So I think that that's pretty fair. Remember, our Veterans Administration, as it is, if anybody applied for those Burroughs records last year, when those came out on burroughs.org, I'm still waiting for mine. I'm not angry about it, but it shows you just how large our Veterans Administration record keeping is. And it's not all in one place. So keep up some hope, okay? So when you get those headstone application files, if your veteran died before 1973, there's a little red check mark next to all their information. So birth date, death date, where they were buried, their service information. That meant they had the original when they were checking against it. So even if that file magically, burned or vice versa, but there's still other records to go for. So don't ever tell somebody don't go, because we get to go get some other records. But that at least you knew it was compared against the original, and that's solid. So that's really, really good. Third place we're going to go is if they served abroad, or you have a family story of them serving abroad, not just Europe. Remember Russia, the Panama Canal Zone, and that one time that we took over the sovereign nation of the Dominican Republic for 12 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did that to kind of prove to Germany that we could. The congressional record on that is amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, but if you have that family story of them going abroad and serving, then that veterans, it's called the U.S. Army Transport List from 1910 to 1939. That's not only going to cover Army personnel, but it's also going to cover all those non-combatants. So the YMCA, YWCA, the nuns, the women who are going to go over and work with French orphans, whatever, Salvation Army. It's all going to be on there because they're paying for passage. And so the Army is letting them, cross safely on these Army vessels. So that's a good place to go. That is going to give you next of kin, which if you're going to have issues or you're trying to have issues finding somebody with a really common last name and you know that they served abroad or have a family story, the next of kin information is sometimes where you can kind of suss that out. So after we get to, that was number 3. Number 4, this can be a wee bit tricky depending on your state or Commonwealth location. So your ancestor, when they enlisted, would have enlisted at a state or Commonwealth level. So that means that they would have been issued a statement of service card. Now, those are going to run the gambit. New York State on Ancestry. Ohio's stuff, I think, is on Family Search. Michigan's, for example, I believe are still on at the state archives, but I think they've been more recently are going to be digitized and put on Family Search. Kentucky, for example, all of theirs is still in their state library and archive system. You have a drop-down menu. You can pay for it. You can send away for it, but it's not online. Illinois, I live here in the great state of Illinois. We had a terrible fire in our adjutant general's office in the 30s. So a bunch of ours are toast. So we get hit doubly hard here in Illinois. So I always like to remind people that Georgia Family Search, New York Ancestry, Indiana's are online on From the Page. So double check to see where they are, because those statement of service cards are federal records that were created and sent to the states and commonwealths. And that was to help process those bonus claims in the 1920s. So it is a federal record. And it's distilled from their military service record. That's why those statement of service cards are chef's kiss. The one caveat, South Dakota, I believe it's South Dakota, they have a Veterans Privacy Act that they put out a few years, their state legislative sent out a few years ago. Those records are now sealed. They are sealed in perpetuity. You cannot get them. All of their military records, you have to be the veteran to be able to get them. So if you have an ancestor in South Dakota, I'm just letting you know, you cannot get them. But there's a very nice email where you can send them, the legislature, and let them know, hey, if somebody's been dead or somebody's card was created 100 years ago, it's probably likely they're dead. And we do need this for genealogy research. Illinois was in the same boat for the longest time until our laws were updated. So it's not that we're not appreciating veterans' privacy rights. What we are getting to is that your ancestor shouldn't have to be a vampire, a werewolf, or another supernatural creature to be able to get their information about their military service. I think that's pretty fair. The last one, which is number 5, is the World War I muster rolls and rosters that are on Family Search. Now, those are free. They can be a wee bit tricky because you should have a listing for just about every month that they're serving. They're not always 100% complete. And depending on when your ancestor went in and when they got out, there may or may not be a listing for every month, but it is hard to kind of shuffle through. And the Family Search mechanism on that particular record set does not allow you to say, okay, I want this particular unit or this particular regiment, or I want this person with this military service number. They don't have that. So going through it feels like a struggle. It's the struggle bus 2.0. So take your time, be patient, go through them. And that'll be a nice conversation for us to talk about with Family Search, maybe when we're coming up to the next Roots Tech, that, hey, let's go in and add that military service number in there and make it a little bit easier to find.
Yeah, those great tips. I love that. I will definitely include all of those on the author page for the podcast, because those are great. Love those tips. We talked about some kind of those key documents, the list that you went down, those are good. So aside from that, what kind of, I know for me, I love historical context. And I think that that's something that's a great piece that you can add into stories that you're including about your ancestors. So what is a helpful way to include that when you're writing? What any like suggestions of resources or ideas that you have?
Yeah, perfect. So there's a couple of things for absolute beginners. And I mean, people who, once you get your military, so if you get everything that's on that list that I gave you, you've got a good place to start running around and finding things. Regimental histories, most of which you can find online, I believe, through the U.S. Army Heritage Center. And if they
Okay.
don't have them online, you can email them and their reference staff will get you a PDF copy. So those are
Okay.
super easy. I
Awesome.
also like to refer people to the U.S. The World War One Monument and Museum in Kansas City. Their staff's
Yes.
amazing,
Yeah.
absolutely amazing, and all of the gentlemen and ladies who work there, at least in their research center, from my understanding, have some sort of either had a military career or they've worked extensively in this form of research. So they're also super helpful for giving you more details and more information. And remember, there's a ton of stuff in their museum and archives which hasn't been digitized. So if you see something in those listings, they'll say like, yeah, we'll just digitize them and we'll just send them to you by email and then off you go. So you could find somebody in their catalog. Let's say my grandpa Rhodes was in the 303 Motor Transport Corps. And there was another guy whose letters were donated to the museum. So I just sent them an email and said, hey, could I, have a couple copies, or could I have a copy of a couple of these letters just to kind of see what he's talking about? They're like, sure. They sent all of them. Now there were only like 10, and it's not my grandpa Rhodes, but I like to think about it. It's the dude who's still kind of sitting next to him or walking next to him or, whatever.
Sure.
And then he's saying, well, we got off the boat in France and all of a sudden we got mobbed by people trying to sell us stuff. And how just people were pushy and how they wanted us to buy these things and how expensive everything was. And I'm like, yes, you're getting it from a very particular point of view.
Right.
At the same time, they are giving you a setting. They're giving you a view of what's happening in this area at that time period. So that's another good resource. The other one are honor books. They're called World War honor books. You'll find a lot of these on Hathi Trust and Internet Archive. And the county war commissions and the state war commissions that were created during the First World War, they would have a local war council, and the war council was involved with everything: Liberty loan drives, draft, food conservation, labor allocation. They're in charge of all of this. And the best part about these that situation is that they had a historian whose job it was to go to all the families who had people who were serving. They would have a nice little summary of their service and a photograph. And then those things were put together, compiled, sent to 8 different publishing houses, most of them in Wisconsin. And they were published, sent back to the community, and those books were sold to the community. So sometimes you'll find them in yard sales, garage sales, vice versa. But they were given to libraries and archives, and they've slowly been digitized onto Internet Archive. So sometimes they're on a city level, sometimes they're on a state level, sometimes they're on a county level. But I always look for World War honor book or World War and then the name of the location. So make sure that if it's, keep your options open. It could be a county, it could be a village, it could be a city, it could be a state. And so the listings can go from just a single line with your ancestor's name in it. Okay, great. To here's a photo. They're the son or daughter of this person. They served here, and it's great because then you get that listing. You're like, oh, this is awesome. And they'll also talk about the people who did, who participated in the Red Cross or the Liberty Loan Drives or the YMCA or the Women's Motor Transport Corps. So there's a lot of different people you're going to be able to find in those honor books. Then the last bit I would say, now this is a little bit above a beginner level, but if you feel like you're ready for this, they do have the U.S. Mourning reports that are available for free on Fold 3. Now, once you have the service number, the unit, regiment, all that other information, and remember, your ancestor's unit, regiment designation could change up to 6 times or could evolve up to 6 times while they're serving. So just kind of be open. That's why those muster rolls are so important, because you want to chart where they are and what they're going and where they're being transferred to. But once you get those once you get into those morning reports, because yes, there's a sick report, and then there's the morning report which is like a daily diary for the commanding officer. So those are going to tell you who won the 3-legged race at the rest camp, who's going on furlough, who's getting special training, who's going to have to stay in their barracks and rest because they're sick again. All of those things are going to be in there. And depending on how chatty the commanding officer is going to be, sometimes they're a station agent, sometimes they're had a harper, so you want to be very, you're going to run the gambit. But that's going to add a lot more information that you didn't have before.
Yeah, that is amazing. Wow. Yeah. And I was going through your book and I saw the morning reports and I had not heard of those before. And that was amazing. And then I do have a question on the honor books.
Yeah.
So I think I know the answer, but I'm asking it anyway. Is there going to be an honor book that could be in every state, or not every state necessarily would have participated?
Yeah, I tried to find as many as I could. And I'm always mindful that there might be one on a shelf in a library or an archive somewhere that we're not finding or seeing because it hasn't been digitized yet.
Yeah.
And it is very hit or miss, depending on just how in it to win it that historian or that history committee is.
Sure.
So I'm always very mindful. That's why you want to check things like books, or you want to check your local garage sales, or check your local museum or archive to see if they have one. And the notes. I think this was a big thing, was just finding the notes. The list of all of our local Will County World War I veterans was actually at the library. People didn't know what it was. I went to the Joliet Public Library and somebody asked, "Oh, hey, you're into war stuff? We think this is World War I. What is it?" And it was a list of all of the county's World War I veterans that had probably been compiled by the County War Commission. It was just in an envelope, and I said, "Yeah, this is what it is." And thankfully they've digitized it and put it online, but it only had the addresses for the local guys in Joliet, and everybody else just kind of got like Lockport or DuPage or Wheaton or wherever. So you're never going to know what you're going to find. Just keep your eyes and ears open and see what the possibilities could be.
Yeah, good. That's a good tip for sure. Question. I love the next 2 questions are 2 of my favorites because they're just more on a personal level. If you could meet one ancestor in person, who would you meet? And what would you ask them?
Oh, okay. So, I mean, besides the fact that, yes, I would love to just miraculously get Grandpa Rhodes here and ask him, where'd you get this diary? Did it just fall? Did you just find it on the ground? It's going to be something dumb, right? It's going to be, he found it on the ground. It was on a table at a restaurant that he was eating, something. It was in the men's washroom. It's going to be somewhere, because who would think, somebody picked it up thinking, oh, somebody just dropped it. I'm going to go out and go see, and that's why it ended up staying, with my family for as long as it did, was just because probably was like, oh, I'm just going to get it back to this person. And it just never really happened.
Right.
But if I really wanted to spring people to life, it would actually be the 3 wives of my ancestor, Adam Poole Vandiver, the prodigious mountain man, adventurer, mountain man. He had over 30 children with 3 different wives, but not all at the same time. A veteran of the Creek War, a cross between Deadpool and Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. He is described in 1848 as being a one gray-eyed, weasel-faced man with a giant beard who wouldn't shut up. Now, I wonder who I descend from. This is not a debate how much of a Vandiver I possibly could be. So I would, great. And I mean, he, in his interview, they said he just wouldn't shut up. But if you ever see those shows on YouTube where they talk about, okay, what does the father know about the children, and the men blow it every time? That's why I want to talk to his wives. I want to talk to Martha, Sally, and Adrienne and say, okay, the 30 some odd children, let's suss this out. How many did you bring in from your former, a bunch of them have been married previously or been in a previous relationship. So I'm like, okay, so who belongs to whom? And let's just kind of sort this out, ladies. And oh, so what, what went on with this child? What on with this child? Blah, 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 blah. And that's who I want to have tea and
Yeah.
crumpets with, are
Yeah.
those ladies, just to kind of figure out, and what's it like to live with this guy?
Yeah, with him.
Like, we get his point of view a lot, but so what's it like to live with this? So it's that's who I would like to meet. The Three Wives of Adam Poole Vanderveer.
I love that. And him for sure. And tell me, so what's the time frame on that, Deborah?
Oh, so he was a veteran of the Creek War. So he was living in Habersham County in a place called Tallulah Falls, which you can still go there today. It's a state or national park. But he was living there from about 18. Well, his father got out there after the American Revolution and started a trading post in Habersham County. So that was probably about 1800, if not a little bit earlier.
Okay.
But he lived until 1871. So we actually have his pension record when he dies in 1877. So it's an interesting bit because he's one of those men, like I used to think of him as kind of like that Daniel Day-Lewis sort of like Ross the Mohican thing. And then you read more about him and you're like, no, this is Gaston and Deadpool had a baby. This is my guy. And I'm like, you just got to kind of roll with it. It's history takes us places we don't anticipate to go.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. For sure. I love that. I need to use that saying. That's good. Okay. What is a favorite story that you have from one of your ancestors?
Oh goodness. It's hard to pick your favorite child, isn't it? I don't want to pick a favorite child. I think I have to think about and say, I really do love the Adam Poole Vanderveer stories. I mean, they are just absolutely bonkers crazy. But if I had to say that there was another story that I loved, it was debunking the family story of how our Dudek ancestors went out to homestead in Nebraska. Yeah. And, we found out it wasn't really a Dudek story. It was, the wife's story, Anna Kusera Dudek. It was her brothers who went to Nebraska to help found this little town in Nebraska. And so they said, hey, sis, come out to Nebraska. So they pack up the baby and grab mom-in-law and, bring her out to Nebraska. And it's an interesting bit because it shows how family stories about, oh, we have this land grant we have this homestead certificate signed by President Garfield. And we have this, and this family lived in a sod hut by themselves on the prairie. And the more you do the research, you're like, they bought it off some dude for $50. Yeah. And they weren't alone. She had her two brothers and their family, and then another brother who moved out and then went to South Dakota. What is it with South Dakota? But it wasn't. And then they left two other brothers at home in Cleveland. So it was an interesting bit because you do feel more of that push pull of like what families are doing and where families are going. So if you only kind of stick to what the family story is, it's what Obi-Wan Kenobi tells us, that many of the truths we think to be true come from a certain point of view. So if you've only ever been told this story from a Dudek point of view, you're not going to see it from the Kusera point of view. And I think that's why I love that whole story, because we still have the bedroom suite that they took with them to Nebraska. My parents still have it. We still have the photo. Oh, and that's like the best part of this family story. My mom, when she and my dad first got married, my mom's from Georgia and my dad's from Michigan. So when my father, they like to joke that my father like threw her over a horse and then ran for the Mason-Dixon. And I'm like, no, she got into this green Charger of her own free will with a baby and a cat in the back. Like, this is not, people will say like, oh, she married that Yankee boy. I'm like, I call him dad. I call him, but she was visiting some of my dad's relatives, my grandpa's sister and her husband, and they went out to the barn to go look at a couple of things that were in the barn. And on the wall were all these wonderful old photographs on the barn in the wall, on the wall of the barn. And my mom said, oh, well, who's that? And who's this? And, and my aunt just said, oh, this is Uncle Bert. He was in World War I. They had his photos up there. Oh, and that's Grandpa Dudek, him on the farm in Nebraska. They were just in the barn because they didn't want them in the house. And my mom said, can I have them? And she said, sure. And she just packed them up and they put them in the car. And that is the foundation. My mother has done more to save Dudek family history than anybody I know. Like, my mother is in it to win it.
Yes.
She just did such a phenomenal job. If it wasn't for her putting all of this stuff and making this part of our lives,
Yeah.
I would have very little to hold on to.
Yeah. Right. That blows me away. Like in my head, I can envision these pictures on the wall in the barn, and I'm like, I've never seen that before, and I'm so sad, but I'm so glad your mom had that foresight.
If they didn't, they would have ended up in a Cracker Barrel.
Yeah.
So, I'd still be able to see them and eat my pancakes, but I wouldn't necessarily know they were my people. So never underestimate the power of a Cracker Barrel.
That is a true point. Oh, that's good. I love that. All right. Well, hey, Deborah, as we kind of finish up here, tell me what if you could just do one piece of advice for somebody. I think people starting out, beginners, do get that sense of overwhelm. So what is something that they could do to just one thing to get started?
One thing when you get started, I always tell people is to be patient and kind with yourself.
Yeah.
Don't really feel, I know that there's pressure to perform, right? Yeah. And that there is a pressure to achieve a goal. So whether that's, I want to race back and find as many people as far back as I can as possible. Or I really want to know where my great grandmother, was from in Ireland or, wherever. All of that are great goals and they're perfectly understandable. I always like to say, be kind and patient to yourself. And it's okay to build on goals. Start with a small goal and go with the next goal. And you're going to learn stuff along the way. You're always going to be able to learn different things and different techniques. And when you do feel overwhelmed or you do feel like you're not getting anywhere, take a break, take a step back, and then maybe call somebody like me, your friendly local librarian, or your local family search center, or maybe go to a local genealogical or historical society meeting and use that open time to just come in and share and talk and work through verbally what you're working through and what you're going through. And you're going to find that you're not the first person that this has happened to. However, your situation may be unique, or your situation may be feel like, yeah, that's a little bit of a sticking point, and that's a big feeling. All of that's perfectly great. So find a really supportive place where you feel like you can go in and just get some work done. And then if you need to take a step back and work on your garden or go travel or take care of the grandkids or go on a trip, whatever, go take that time for yourself. Genealogy, it will be there when you come back. I promise. It will come back. It will be there when you come back. And then you can get started again at a time that maybe suits you a little bit better.
Yeah. I think even for a seasoned person, I think being able to take that step back is so important, because when you do come back to it, you're looking at it with fresh eyes.
Absolutely.
And, something that you may have been like obvious to you this time was not before. So I think that's great advice. Well, Deborah, you have been such a pleasure this morning. This has been absolutely wonderful and just a wealth of information. And I so appreciate your time, and I feel super honored that you spent time with me today. So thank you.
Oh, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, so glad you're here. And I'm probably going to be bugging you with questions even after this, because you are just an expert, and I can tell. So thank you.
No, thank you.
Until next time, friends, embrace the power of your family's untold tale and embark on a journey of discovery. Let the ink flow and the words dance as you weave together the threads of your ancestors' lives. Start writing your family stories today and let their voices echo through the generations to come at storied.com. Have a great day, everyone. And that brings us to the end of this episode of the Family Treehouse, where we celebrate the power of storytelling and preserving our family legacies. Storied is more than just a platform for sharing stories. Dive into those historical records and newspapers, discovering the hidden gems that bring your ancestors to life. Add branches to your family tree, connecting the dots between generations. Thank you for joining us on this storytelling journey. Your stories matter, and through Storied, they have the power to resonate across time and touch the hearts of generations to come. Keep uncovering your family's history and keep the spirit of storytelling alive with Storied.